Hi, everybody. Alexis here. I want to talk about the class that I'm teaching starting on May 10th. It's called Energy Embodied. And a lot of you may be wondering, what is energy? Why should I give a crap about energy? That kind of thing. And I'll just invite you into a quick practice right now so that we can touch in with that. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what the class is, what it entails, and why I think it's so important, why I'm so excited to teach it. So if it feels right for you, you can close your eyes. We'll just do a little 60-minute check-in here. And if not, you can keep them open. You can change your physical position in any way, no worries. And just start to notice for a moment where you are. You might start with your physical body. Notice the air on your skin. Notice your physical sense of the space around you, any sensations that are coming in, whether those are sounds or smells or tastes lingering, or any emotional qualities or any other sort of sensory or even intuitive qualities of the space that you're in your body in this moment in time. And just take a moment to add to that, noticing where you are relative to all of that. You feel a little out of the body, maybe feel a little dragged back in wherever you've been in this day, or maybe a little forward of yourself in the future, all the things you have planned for the rest of your day. Wherever it is, trust that with your will and your intention to guide it, you can start to welcome your energy back into this space and this point in time. So you might see that as a color or a texture or a quality or shape. However it shows up for you, start to just track that with your breathing. And with each breath, start to gather a little more of yourself from wherever you've been or wherever you may still be or wherever you may be going. Gather with each breath that self, all that makes you you, back into this moment, in this body, in this room, in this space at this time. You might see streams or streamers. You might feel like a ball of yarn winding itself up. You might feel like a file downloading or any other metaphor that works for you. Trust your imagination and your will and your choice. You can choose to bring yourself back into this moment, to arrive in this body at this time. And then let's get a little more specific. Highlight the head, the mind, all the intellectual faculties that you have. And take a breath and just blow that out with some light, some energy. Really feel into what's going on in the head and inhabit the space of your mind. And then with your next breath, let that ball of energy that is you drop down into your heart center, that space in the middle of your chest, a little more than just the physical heart. And then follow the path of gravity and let that ball of energy that is you drop down into your belly, the bowl of your pelvis. Maybe you can think of that as the procreative center. And then just take a moment to settle into that center. This may not be immediately super comfortable or easy. Maybe a place where some feelings or some sensations arise that you weren't necessarily expecting. That's okay. With whatever arises, trust the solidity of your bones. Notice how they continue to hold you up. Trust the solidity of whatever is beneath you, the floor, the chair, the bed, even further below that, the land, the earth, the entire planet supporting you all the way down to the very center of the earth. See if in just the next few breaths you can feel that support. You don't have to do anything else but notice. physically, truly, literally in this moment, you are supported right now. Nice work. Now, if you want to stay with this or turn me off and work with that even more, great. But if you want to shift focus, you can come back up a little bit, maybe settling back into the heart space, and we'll talk about the class. So Energy Embodied is a 6-week sort of slightly compressed immersion into a body of practices that I learned from my teacher, Christina Lee Pratt, at the Last Mass Center. And the body of practices is grouped under the umbrella of the deep liberation process. And you may also be familiar with the book that was written to describe this body of practices. It's called Deep Liberation by Langston Kahn. That came out last year. But if not, no worries. These practices are both for the mastery of your energy body, which includes the cultivation, learning what the energy body is and isn't, learning how to work with energy effectively so that we take it out of like the woo-woo conceptual space of the mind and actually put it in the physical sense of the body in the moment. And it also includes a skill that we call energy body clearing, which is learning how to intervene when we find things in the energy body that are not working as they are meant to, that are holding on to outmoded patterns or habits or behaviors that are really acting out of relationship with our authenticity and integrity in the moment for whatever reason. So these practices have been super life-changing for me. They're the foundation of everything that I practice beyond them, from the most advanced, like exciting, wild, weird, spirit stuff that I do to the very basic things like showing up to my email inbox and every day, which, is not always so basic. And so for that reason, that's why I'm choosing to offer these practices right now versus any other practice that I could offer, that I'm trained in offering, that I'm really excited to offer, because these practices are the foundation on which everything else that I do is built. Something that I notice a lot is that I get a lot of clients that come through my astrology practice and, just in engaging in different spiritual communities and things like that, where we have a ton of information, whether that's really psychological information, like I've been through all the years of therapy, maybe even decades. I could recite this laundry list and encyclopedic articulation of my trauma and all the different psychological and even maybe political and cultural factors that informed my trauma. Or I have a really informed spiritual vocabulary where I've studied with all these different teachers, read all these different books, done all these different practices, developed myself in all these different ways. And yet I'm still finding myself unable to take the actions that I want to take. And so for some of us, we reach for more information, more information, more information. For some of us, we eventually shut down. We decide, well, F all of this, it doesn't really work. I'm going to go and just be a day trader or something. There's all these different ways that frustration starts to show up with the basic question of how do I take new actions? I'm recognizing that the things that I'm doing are not fully working for me, and I don't know how to change that. So that's really the answer that these practices are for me, of how do I take new actions. So before I go on, I'll say there are 3 things that I wanted to highlight about these practices that I found important and were basically my reasons. Like I kept asking myself, why am I teaching this right now? First, because they're actually really fun. So that's really important to me because, I can be really self-serious. And I have a certain attraction to things that are very grave and heavy and solemn and, ceremonial and all of that stuff. So that's actually really healthy for me that these practices are actually held in this relatively light way and that they're actually really fun to do. And they're not super like time consuming or heavy or intense necessarily. They're really like meant to be something that, if I give half an hour to this every day, because that's what I have, I get real juice and actual change out of my life from that half an hour. So Another thing that I think is really fun about them is that they really engage my imagination. I don't have to learn someone else's visionary vocabulary for engaging my energy. I don't have to learn a set of rules or prescriptions, or, oh my God, the worst thing is the correspondences. Like in the North, you have lapis lazuli and you have bowl, and but you know what I mean, all that crap. Like, no offense, it's not necessarily crap. It works really well within certain traditions, but that's totally unnecessary for what we're doing, which is developing and actually realizing what our symbolic language already is, engaging with what's there in my imagination, what's meaningful for me. So it's really cool day to day to be doing my energy body cultivation and clearing work, and to be working with imagery that's actually mine, that's actually meaningful from within my life. And it's not just something handed down by a teacher or a tradition, etc. So that's something I find really fun. And I find it really fun to work with other people, because I think what is really cool is when we all start to bring our different symbolic languages online, we all start to bring our different energetic, selves online in their uniqueness. The calls that we do together, whether they're classes or partner work or group work, they're all really fun to me. And there's like this real quality of joy that comes from actually engaging my emotions and my energy effectively. It just feels good. So that's one. I think it's really fun. Two, I find these practices to be really responsive to my actual life. So I've studied in all kinds of traditions, particularly like yoga, Buddhism, that kind of thing. Yogic traditions, and nothing against those traditions, but a lot of times as they're taught in the West, and it's coming through the lens of many decades or more of colonization, centuries really, and so you get these kind of broken or hobbled traditions that come, and then they land in this kind of broken system that we live in the United States or in Western cultures, quote unquote, and they become really self-serious again, or they become really precious, where you can only do your yoga or your meditation with this music on and this incense burning and with this sort of fabric laid out on your table, and in this particular set of leggings with the matching top or whatever. I don't mean to poke fun, because I've been there, you know what I mean. I've been really immersed in my case, yoga communities, where it's like within the realm of those communities, whether they were kind of cult-like atmospheres where we all made these implicit or explicit agreements to agree on certain things, or just very escapist. It's just so sumptuous and nice and tranquil in this space, and everyone is basically treating me like a queen in this space. I can do my practice in that perfect space. And then I walk out into my life, or like, my mom calls and I'm flying off the handle. I'm reacting really out of proportion to the moment. I'm freaking out, spiraling about the same things, etc. Someone gives me a cross look in the yoga class and I cannot let it go. Da, 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 da. So these practices do not rely on this idea of perfection, and they do not rely on this seclusion or this withdrawal from the world. And they also don't rely by extension on a withdrawal from my senses or withdrawal from my body. It's actually about the day-to-day experience of my body, showing up in my practice, feeling like kind of crap. Okay, cool. How do I resource for that? Going to the grocery store and someone's over there is getting arrested. Someone's getting a tow. These people are getting in a fight. The cashier has to run off because she's going to poop her pants and all this crazy stuff. And I'm just like, how do I respond to this effectively in this moment? And it's not, again, it's not about the rules or the correspondences or the white knuckling, the will. I've developed myself through practice. And so I just know how to respond through the moment, through the force of my will, because I also did a lot of that. I meditated to the point of I cannot respond, because basically, if I'm going to overreact, I would just stop. But I wasn't actually responding. So none of that applies within the frame of these practices. These practices are about cultivating your energy to the point that you get out there in the messy world and you still have your grounding. You still are able to maintain your boundaries, and you don't actually have to think about it that much in the moment, if at all, because you're so busy just responding. They're so responsive in the sense of I'm not just trying not to do the same old things. I'm actually just making new actions because I have intervened where those old choices are stuck in my body. So they're really, really responsive in that way. And I find them really important for that. They're also really responsive to relationships. They're not about this sort of perfect, like quote unquote Zen ideal of like me sitting alone in my bedroom. It's the mess of when my boundaries rub up against someone else's boundaries. It's not always a mess, but it's often a mess. And there's creative tension there, there's friction, and that sort of like natural and organic growth that comes from engaging that and still managing to look for what I want while acknowledging what the other person wants and open heart centered communication. It's actually about relating. And as for those of you, which is not everyone necessarily, that are doing spirit work or work with other than human energies, or you're really just like engaged with like the trees in your neighborhood, or the squirrels who I love, or whatever, or the rocks on your altar. The relationship aspect of the energy body is really key, because with me in integrity with my inner relationships and my relationship with myself and my energy, I'm able to then engage with others with more integrity and actually figure out who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to spirit energies, actually figure out whether something is coming from within the house or outside of the house, etc. So there's this real level of clarity and discernment that comes from these practices. But basically, they're just responsive. They're responsive and adaptable to the moment. They're not just, I have a set of rules, and anyone who doesn't follow my rules, you get iced out of my life because you're not high vibes. You're not yogic enough. You're not, etc. You're not, listening to the Dharma. Not you're toxic. It's nothing like that. I'm able to engage, and when someone really is destructive, I am able to own my boundaries, etc. But that's not the point necessarily. It's really about me being in relationship with others and still being able to be in integrity no matter what they show up with. The third thing I would say is that they work. And so that's where I'll share kind of my experience briefly, of course. So I had been through all the things, right? I knew really well how to white knuckle my way through certain situations because of yoga, meditation. I had really had a lot of really profound and effective transformational experiences through yoga. And I don't want to bash on yoga just because it's something that I no longer specifically practice. I still do things that are maybe considered yoga. But it's just not how I couch my practice anymore. Like in my first teacher training, I remember like being in a half pigeon pose and really having this sort of flashback, is what I termed it then, of violent experiences that I had experienced in my childhood, and being really like, whoa, and having this big emotional release. And that was really cool and taught me so much at the time relative to what I could receive. And then I also had really big spiritual and energetic experiences doing Kundalini practices, doing Wicca, magic, ritual, all kinds of stuff. But my oldest relationships, and then relationships that seemed to mirror those of like my parents, my family, etc., would always seem to trigger me back to the same crap. And I would always find myself flying off the handle, really out of proportion to the moment. Even when I could fully articulate to myself, this is not my father. This man has no power over me, technically, literally, physically. This is just some random stranger sometimes. I would still not be able to let go of the anger, the rage, this intensity. And I would find myself finding ways to articulate my way out of that, where I would either make it about how that person had done something wrong, and it surely was that. And this really, unfortunately, ended a lot of friendships for me because I was so convinced that it was everyone else's fault for triggering me. And then I also had articulated all these really advanced sort of pseudo spiritual ideas like, oh, well, my Mars is in Aries, so this is why I react in this way, which, that gives me as an astrologer an in. But that Mars in Aries at essence is not just meant to be bulldozing their anger on everyone else. That is not an appropriate expression of that placement. It's not an effective expression of that placement. It wants to be more than that. So these practices, encountering them kind of by accident, was such a watershed for me, where I was able within the course of a few sessions to literally alter this fundamental programming that had rooted in me in my childhood, and suddenly show up in relationships with my parents, for example, so different. without really even trying. And the weird thing is they showed up differently too, because my energy was contributing to that dynamic really powerfully. And the scary fact is the more work you do with energy and with, developing the body and stuff like that in holistic practices, the more you may actually be contributing to the dynamic. I was a powerful, really empowered manifester, and I could not understand why the same patterns were occurring to me over and over and over until I really learned how to just engage them. And again, half an hour moving in, fun, exciting imagery that actually had like a sense of adventure and traction and grounding in my felt experience allowed for an appropriate and healthy and like relieving emotional release, and then allowed me to move on with a new sense of wholeness and integrity and clarity within myself, and then engage these oldest relationships that I had really in new ways without even trying. I was like, whoa, this is like magic. But the fact is, it's really just a function of healing that many indigenous cultures understand very deeply. Many non-Western cultures understand to some degree. I think if you track into most holistic traditions, or mystical traditions, at their core, they have clearing practices. We just don't happen to have them very popularized in the West. People stumble into it through therapy, they stumble into it through body work, energy work, etc. But it's still sort of haphazard, lacking the clarity that we're looking for to be able to do it over and over systematically so that I can always show up responsively to my life. I don't have to project my triggers onto other people anymore. I don't have to keep making the same mistakes and making my mistakes other people's faults. So it's going to look differently for everyone. Everyone's going to have a different story. Not everyone will be the person that's always overreacting. Some of us are underreacting. Some of us are cycling. There's a lot of ways, and even more meticulous and refined ways that contemporary people are acting out their triggers or their traumas or whatever you want to call the things that get stuck within us. But all of it roots down to just this an ability to cultivate, understand, work with the energy of our bodies effectively, and B, the inability to maybe the total ignorance of what it means to truly heal, what it means to truly give a death stroke to something, complete the process, let it be completed, facilitate its completion, and move on. So, and I think you see the effects of this all over in culture right now. And probably if you really sit back and think about your last week or month or year, you probably see the effects in your life too. So that's my invitation to you, is to try out this fun, adaptive, and effective skill. I'm happy to be offering an early registration discount. So right now it's April 6, 2022, and the class begins May 10th. But until April 15th and through April 15th, I offer a early registration discount, sliding scale $95 to $135. And, really, I want everyone to know that money is not ever meant in my practice to be an object to you accessing this work. So if you find that money is the one reason you can't sign up, please shoot me an email and let's just jump in. You don't have to justify it. You don't need to show me your bank statement or anything like that. I don't want you to. Please don't. Just jump in and register and let's do it. But I really just want this work to be effective because I think it's so, so valuable and important. And it sets us up because I really do want to be teaching astrology and different forms of spirit work that I also really enjoy and find really important for my practice. But this is the foundation without which I don't think anything else, in my experience, can really function as effectively. So that's my invitation to you. Early registration ends April 15th. But even if you can just pay the full price, that's totally cool. 195 to 265 is the asking sliding scale. I consider that a sacrifice between you and spirit, and I also consider that a donation. And I'm really happy to waive the minimums of all my work at all times to people that are Black, Indigenous, people of color, or anything along that spectrum of experience. And anyone queer or trans or otherwise marginalized in a way that they don't have the money to afford this work, I'm super, super happy to waive any minimums. I'm super happy to take the money week to week. You don't have to pay all up front. Your deposit just helps me budget out the rest of my month, helps me actually pay my rent while also doing all the prep work that I have to do for the class, and just get a sense of who's going to show up. But I really, really hope that you'll join us. So Tuesdays, starting May 10th, the sessions will be live and recorded. They're 2 hours, which can be kind of a slog, but there's going to be movement. Again, it's fun. It's not just like da 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 da, here's what you have to learn and memorize and da da da. It's very emphasizing the practice, the things that we do together, and how to make that work in your life. There'll be some supplemental movement practices, there's course materials, there's partner work, group work, etc. All of it hopefully building into 6 weeks of an immersion in this skill set so that you don't have to be dependent on me for it. You can take it and go work with it in your life and continue to work with us as a group as it feels appropriate to you. Because this work is really meant to be done as peers. It's not meant to be something that you get stuck with this facilitator teacher relationship or anything like that. So it's really different than Western therapy and that kind of thing. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Please share with your friends and folks that you think may be interested. Feel free to poke around my website if you feel like maybe a one-on-one session or several is more your bag. I do have the capacity to teach this stuff one-on-one. I think it's more effective in a group, but that really just also depends on the person. So for some people, it really will be more effective to work one-on-one. And if you would rather work with me in a divinatory way, I have my astrology sessions and other forms of divination still available too. So I hope you join me in some way, poke around the website, reach out with any questions and share with your friends. And I really hope sincerely that we all continue to find the practices, skills, modalities, and processes that we need so that we can show up effectively to our lives with the understanding that each of us are here for many, many reasons, including the sharing and the expression of our true selves and our gifts with the world and this big, beautifully messy, interconnected earth, planet, being, dreamer we call home. So thank you so much for watching. Hope to hear from you and much love on the rest of your day.